So in this session we're going to work with selection tools, and we're going to use a couple of tools to create a poster based on selections taken from several images and placed on a pre-arranged background. Now the selection tool group begins at the very top of your tool palette with the rectangle selection tool. You also have the ellipse tool, the free selection tool, fuzzy select tool. You can select through color, or we can select by scissor shapes, and we have foreground select tool. Now we will not be using all of these tools, but we will be using some of them. So I'm going to open the background image first, and I have these stacked in the recent items. So this is the background that we're actually going to put our poster onto, and we will be opening and closing multiple images. And the important point here is, once we've made the selection and we've copied it over to the background, remember to close your other image, otherwise you're going to use up a whole pile of RAM and you will have your computer possibly crashing midway through your session. So I'm going to straight away open another image, and this image is a poppy. Now for this selection we're going to take the poppy out of the center of this image, and we're going to use this lasso tool, which allows me to move freehand around the image, or I can use polygons to position the points where I want this selection actually to be made from. So I'm going to click on the tool, and I'm going to begin by clicking on the poppy roughly here. Now you can see when I click I get a circle, and I get a line drawn out from that circle. Now I can use that line and I can click again, and I set down points along the way. Now if I come across a reasonably straight line, I can just move freehand and I can gather that in straight away. And you can see this point that I've just clicked on is filled in with a yellow colour, and that's basically telling me that that point can be edited. I can also edit other points simply by clicking and holding the mouse button down, and you can see the line is quite pliable. So any minor corrections that I need to make, I can make as I go along. Each time I want to lay down a point, I just left click once, and you can see I can move reasonably quickly throughout the whole of the image. And the more I click, the more points I have to work with to make corrections within these areas here. Now you need to make these corrections fairly sharply, because these points will actually disappear as we move further around the selection. Now if you do spend a little bit of time with this, you can get quite an accurate selection, but you need to pay attention to the detail of what you're trying to do, and click with accuracy on your image. Now I've reached a point here where I'm almost returning to the original point, and you can see that not only do I have points back on the line behind where I'm working, but they're also appearing forward of me, and that basically means that the selection can now see the starting point. So if I go here and I just press enter, it will finish the selection for me, and I now have that flower completely selected. I'm going to right click within the poppy itself, and you can see I can bring up the menus here rather than having to go up to the menu bar at the top of the screen. Go to the edit menu, and I'm going to copy that poppy, and I can switch over here to the background image, and same again, right clicking in here, I can edit. And what I'm going to do actually here is I'm going to paste as a new layer, and basically what that means is once I paste it in, I will have it as a layer and I will be able to move it around the background. So paste as new layer, and you can see over here in the layers palette we have the background layer, and I have the poppy image which is called clipboard. I'm going to rename that simply by double clicking on clipboard, and I'll call it poppy. Press enter, and I now have that layer named. I'm going to grab the move tool, and I'm going to move the poppy, and you can see I now have that placed in the bottom right hand corner of the image. I can go back and I can close the poppy image. If it asks you to save, just say no, close without saving. And the next image I'm going to open up is this monkey image here. Now this image is of a circular plaque, but unfortunately the angle of the camera means that it's not a perfect circle, so it's going to be a little difficult to select. But by using some of the background tools within ellipse selection tool, we can actually get quite an accurate selection of what we're looking for. So I'm going to just click on the tool itself so it's active, and I'm going to draw out a very rough selection across the image. Now here's where the selection is happening, the marching ants inside, but you can see I have boxes to the left, right, top and bottom, 4 corners, and I also have boxes which pop up on the halfway line on each of the edges of the square, and I can use these to move the selection and shape it to where I want it to be. So with a little bit of playing I can actually get this selection. What I'm trying to do is fit over the black line in the background there. Roughly that is the selection I'm after. So again, right click in the middle, edit, copy, back to my background, right click, edit, paste as new layer. Now that has arrived more or less where I wanted to, but I would actually prefer that if the poppy was sitting on top of the plaque rather than the plaque sitting on top of the poppy. I have the monkey here. I'm going to rename that, press the enter key, and at the bottom of the layers palette I can actually move that down 1 level, and you can see that the poppy now sits on top of the plaque. So I can go back and I can close this image. Again, close without saving. And I'm going to open a third image, and that one is these lanterns here. I'm going to take this central lantern here away, and I'm going to use the same tool that I use for the poppy on the free selection tool, and again by mapping the line of the lanterns I can make a selection of these lanterns. Now you can see, because this selection is quite narrow, the actual lantern is quite narrow, I am getting polygons marking on the opposite side that I've just selected. Now that's not an issue so long as you don't press enter and finish the selection too early. So I'm just mapping this final section here now, and you can see I'm using quite a few polygons to get it as accurate as I possibly can. And when I get to the top here, I can just seal the gap and I have a selection. So I'm just going to right click again and copy that, go to my poster which is now taking shape, and I'm going to paste that again as a new layer. So paste as a new layer, and there's my lantern in position, and I'm going to use the move tool again, and I'm going to move that layer over to the opposite side. So somewhere around about there will do me fine, but I would prefer that lantern, which I'll rename now, I would prefer if this layer was draped above the poppy. So again, in the layers palette I'm just going to move it up 1 level, and you can see now that the lantern drapes across the poppy. I have a final image to open at this stage, and the image I'm going to open here is this plaque. Now it's asking me do I want to rotate the image because it's coming in lying on its side, so I'll rotate that so it'll be the right way up, and I'm going to use the rectangle select tool, and I'm just going to draw a simple selection to take the central plaque here and the actual text out of this. Now you can see I've got the same controls that I had on the elliptical mark tool, so there's no reason to get your selection wrong. Again, right click and copy. I'm going to go back to my background and I'm going to paste in as a new layer. So I'm going to close all unnecessary images, and you can see that the canvas of this image is bigger than the poster that we're putting it onto. So if I go into the layer menu, I can scale the layer, and this allows me to change the size of that layer in pixels or inches, and you can see that these two values are interlocked, so if I change one, the other one will react to that. So I'm going to change the height, and I'm going to bring that down to about 1400, and if I click in the width, you will see that it updates to reflect that. So if I scale that, you can see that the plaque has taken on the new dimensions that I've given it. So I'm going to move that, use the move tool, and I'll just reposition it then into the corner. Now you can see it's still over clipping. We can fine tune that, but the final touch to this plaque is we're going to now colour the background of the image, and the way I can do that is if I go to the tools palette and I pick up the colour picker tool, and you'll notice that my current foreground and background colours are black and white, but by using this tool I can go onto the image and select part of this plaque. This is the active layer, and you can see that that colour is now my foreground colour. I'm going to go over to my layers palette over here, and I'm going to go down to the background of the image, and you can see the bounding boxes around the bottom layer. And I'm going to use the paint bucket tool, and I'm going to use that with a single click. I'll do it here so you can see it better, to fill that area with that colour. So I now have that background colour filled in, and you can see it's gone in behind all of the layers because they are above the background. I'm not impressed with this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on that. It's the only one I haven't renamed, and I'm just going to move it down a couple of levels. I need to get it behind the monkey, and you'll see when it passes below the monkey, and if I select the background, because the colours are the same, it now looks as if it's perfectly positioned. And that is using selections to create an image. Please experiment and enjoy, and in time you will become proficient with selection tools.